Welcome to Let's Talk About It with Sons and Daughters. I am your host, Arden, and today I'm joined with my sister, Julie, and also a new guest, which is Abby Drown. And this is actually Abby's first podcast, and we're super excited that you're doing this with us because we're excited to have you on.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're excited because we're talking about the topic of dating and purity today, because we actually just launched a new course called Let's Talk About Sex. So we wanted just to kind of have a further conversation kind of around it. Abby and Julie and myself were all on it, so we wanted just to kind of dive deep into that. But before we get into that, I wanted to ask you guys some fun questions, just always to lighten the mood, kind of get people to know you a little bit. So Abby, I'll start with you. I would love to hear your most awkward dating experience.
Whoa, I wasn't expected. That was not an expected question. All right. Awkward dating experience. Wow. I think the word awkward kind of just sums up my dating life.
That's fair.
Yeah. I had a guy once really show great interest, but I kept him at arm's length. I was like, we can do Whole Foods, you know? And then a year later, he mailed me a receipt.
No.
From our Whole Foods date.
That is awesome.
That was probably the most awkward experience I've had.
What did you do?
You know, I appreciated it and I honored it in privacy.
Honored the receipt.
I was like, that's kind of him. That's really sweet.
Oh, he didn't want you to pay it?
No, he didn't want me to pay it. He was just like, I really loved our date at Whole Foods a year ago.
I thought he was looking to be reimbursed.
No, he wrote me a love note. It was just very kind, but I was like, okay. Bye.
Wow.
So
Julie,
pretty bad.
do you have anything? Anything Addison did?
Oh no, he had really
He's
smooth
perfect.
moves.
Love it.
Like clearly it worked really well.
That's why you guys are married.
Yeah, and 4 children later.
Wow.
He's got moves, but I feel like our dating recently has been a little awkward, and by awkward I mean like boring.
Mm-hmm.
So we're stepping it up. We're
Yeah.
getting away from running errands and talking about work stuff to having fun and dreaming. So yeah, moving past the awkwardness of a dating lull post marriage.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, good. That's always important. That's what I found in marriage, is making sure that errands and all that stuff does not become your date time.
Yeah, it doesn't count.
It very much can, very easy. Awesome. Well, what was the most frustrating moment that you guys have had through dating? Abby?
I think lack of communication and just being like really upfront and transparent is the most frustrating part of dating.
Yeah, that's very true.
So,
I feel like that's a consistent. I wish more
Yeah, that
people would
happens
just
a lot.
be way more intentional and upfront
oh,
with things.
for
so that's
sure.
good.
Yeah.
Julie,
Yeah.
anything?
Well, again, on how awesome Madison is, on that note, he like up front right away was like, I don't want to play games,
Yeah.
so don't assume anything I'm doing is a game. Like, let's just be super clear in our communication, because I think that is what causes almost all frustration, and not just in dating, in marriage as well. When you just aren't communicating and you're assuming so much about what the other person is saying or not saying or doing or not doing. And it's like, let's just lay it out there.
Yeah.
And it's messy, it's awkward, but it's better than the alternative.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. So, because awkward, frustrating, sometimes these things can be awkward and frustrating, is what is the cheesiest pickup line, Christian pickup line too, that you've ever gotten?
I would say something along the lines of like, I've already known you've said no, but I'm gonna be like, you can call me Joshua because I'm gonna tear your walls down. So cheesy.
Persistence.
Yeah.
It's
works.
key.
Cheesy but effective.
Yeah.
So it worked.
I mean, I would say like,
Who's
not
tearing
for
down
that
your walls?
Yeah, okay. Awesome.
I have none. Like,
Julie doesn't have any. That's fair.
No, that
I
never
don't
would have
think-
worked.
Yeah, and I don't think I ever
Yeah,
used a
no.
Christian pickup line. We did have a pickup line video, and there was a lot of Christian pickup lines.
That was
in it.
really
so.
fun.
Yes, so you can check it out.
back
Actually,
in the day. I was
you
in it.
Yes, Abby was in
Oh,
it. It was the
yes.
Try Not to Laugh challenge. So that would
No,
be-
Was it Try Not to Laugh?
right? Because we put Gatorade.
No, that was the spitting one.
That was the, yeah. That was
Yeah,
perfect.
either way, those were
jokes.
great. You
Okay.
should definitely go look for that. Yeah, it was
Well,
awesome.
Well, cool. Well, I want to get into the topic of purity because I want to make sure we talk about this. Purity is such a big conversation. We can sometimes just minimize it to sexual purity. So we want to make sure we just have a conversation around purity as a whole because we want to walk in a lifestyle of purity. And it's not just something that we do from time to time, or when we say, no, I'm pure, it's like, no, it's actually a lifestyle. And so what does purity mean to you, and how has that definition evolved? I mean, has that definition even evolved over the years?
Yeah, I think the essence and nature of purity is that it is evolving. And so I would say early on in my walk with God, it was this idea of a lifestyle and something to aspire to, hopefully maybe one day if I prayed enough and read my Bible enough. And then I feel like what it has become is much more this picture of just the refinement, the journey of refinement, where God is like not content to leave anything that is impure, anything that taints just me as a whole and my life as a whole. And so it's been continually entering into the refiner's fire, like going there with God and letting him take off the impurities, whatever that looks like in whatever given situation, where it's not isolated to sexual purity or impure thoughts or I don't know what I watch or listen to or read, but it much more is holistic, like Julie as a person being refined.
I love that.
I love that. Yeah, I think purity is an endless journey. For me, it definitely started off as like a behavioral thing and changing different things in my life, cutting certain situations out of my life, habits. But as I've grown, I feel like purity really is, for me, an experience. Like, yes, it is all that Julie just said, and that's probably the best definition of it, that refinement place with God. But for me, it's more of like, it is like an evolvement, a sense of like, okay, God, like where can my motives be more pure? Like how can I have an attitude of purity? Because there are so many times where we might not know where our motives are pure or where our actions could be a little bit sloppy. And I think like having an attitude of grace and being like, I just have to trust the process of purity. I have to trust that like I'm seen as purity, that I view myself as pure more than anything. And so I think in this season, purity is an attitude and a choice for sure, but it is an experience and it is a feeling in some sense. And it is just something that I practice visualizing in my life. Like, where can I see more purity in my life and how can I go after that?
Yeah. Well, I love what you guys both said, because it comes from this place of like purity as being a place where you live from. It's not this, thing that you have to like grab in different seasons or things like that. It's like, no, God said we are made pure. And so because of that, I live from that. I don't do an action and chase an action to become pure. I live from that. Because I think that's honestly a problem I've seen a lot with a lot of people, is that they're like, man, I slipped up. I made this mistake, or I had wrong intentions or things like that. And so I'm not pure. And it's like, no, when you do that and you continue just to play this chasing game, you're going to have to continue to keep renewing your mind, resetting that mindset of thinking like, oh, I'm not good enough in this area, but rather than living from this place of understanding what has God actually given me as I walk out this journey and walk out my life, as I get to live from this position. So I love that. We talked a lot about on the study of just different things that we had to navigate and overcome. Like we made sure that on this study we got very personal with things, that we did not leave things in the dark. And so I wanted to ask you guys, what have been some things, and again, it does not have to deal with sexuality or sexual purity, but what have been some things that in your purity walk have you had to overcome?
Yeah, you go.
Okay. For me, the biggest thing is a mindset of I'm not enough. I think that is an impure thought. I don't think that God intends for us to live out of a place of not feeling enough. So overcoming that place of enoughness, like I have to do something in order to earn something, or I need to act a certain way in order to feel a certain way, or just really kind of stripping off that place of penance and like needing to be something in order to be enough. And I think that in purity, God just wants you as you are. Like he takes care of the rest, and it's okay to not show up in a standard of perfection. There's a lot of different things that church culture puts on us as believers that aren't standards that God necessarily puts on us. And so he's okay with the process, and he wants us to value ourselves, and he wants us to know that we're enough.
Yeah.
Just as we are, you know?
Yeah.
So
I love that.
I would say that's what I've had to overcome.
I think that's powerful, Abby, in that you said he's okay with the process. Like God's okay with any of those things as long as we're inviting him in.
Yeah.
As long as there's an open door, not just like, I'm in process. Like, let me be, let my truth be my truth. And God's like, no, because like you're saying, you stand from a place of wholeness, a place of righteousness when you know, like, God's bringing me through this. Like, there's what's on the other side of this is so good. And like you said, when you have that mentality of not being enough, it leaves so many open doors for things to creep in that will confuse you and bring just
idolatry.
Taint. Oh, tons of, I think that's the best way to sum it up. It's like, it's an open door to idolatry.
So is.
That's really good. For me, currently, I would say where God is wanting to purify is in my opinions and my judgment, where just not holding so tight to them or recognizing where they're coming from or why I feel so strongly, like what's behind these things. Why is the amount of energy and emotion and frustration and just a breakdown of relationship? Why am I allowing that to take place based upon things that I hold so tight to? And like you said, the why behind it. Like there's things in church culture put on us and we just kind of accept it as God without going there relationally with God. Like what's behind this? What's your heart behind this? Understanding it for ourselves. So I would say that's where I'm at. Just this total purifying of like what could seem like the minuscule and small details of life. It's just in my personal journey, like that's where I'm at, where God's just not content to leave anything untouched, any stone unturned. He's like, nope, we're going to go there. Okay.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and I think, and too with that is like in regards to relationship, as you work to what God's view of purity is, you get to see God's view of people. You know, because you see relationships, you see people with this pure expression of not judging their intentions or judging their motives, but truly seeing them the way that God sees them, which I think is super powerful. Because I think that's one of the biggest things that we have as Christians, like where the world judges by intent. Like that's the massive thing. News is like it's big intent factor. It's like, oh well, you had this intent, and there's opinions, all that stuff. But us for Christians, we have the ability to be able to see through the intent and see the person as Jesus sees them and be able to speak to that. I know for me, when I was just navigating, like for purity, I'll take it from the sexual side of things. When I had to navigate things with sexual purity of pornography, that was really difficult because it was something that every single time I fell into it was like this overwhelming amount of just shame and just honestly such difficulty and just knowing like, hey, this is not what God's called me to be. And even in that process, like that was a process of working on my purity because I felt every single time I'm like, this is not it. Like this is not like I know better. I know what the Word of God says about me. And it was always this battle that I had to continue to wage war against. And I think it's something that we have to be intentional. Like as purity comes, it's not something that we have to run away from. When I think about like battles, no war has ever been won by running away. It's always been won by running towards something, understanding what you're fighting for and going at that at full capacity. So I think with purity, that's something we've got to know. Like, this is going to be something, whether that is in motives, whether that's in purity of sexual purity or just, relationships, that is something that we're going to have to fight towards. And we got to understand that. So what do you, going kind of on more of sexual purity, what do you think is kind of turning people off from waiting? I think more and more as our culture is speaking to this idea of, hey, waiting, that's old school. That's something that's way back when. That's something that your parents did. What do you think has been turning people away from that?
I think it's everything in our culture. Like we are living currently in this fast food culture where we don't wait for anything.
Wow.
You know, if we have to wait 2 days for our Amazon order, it feels like, what? It's
like
not
they're
going
not
to get here
coming.
tomorrow? Like, why don't they stock this in the warehouse?
Yeah.
And so I think we are feeding that in very small ways all throughout our life. So then when it comes to something that there are very real urges and a drive within us for, it almost feels like a no-brainer. Like, why would I wait when one, like, no one's waiting, so it can feel very outdated or isolating, and also this idea of like, my spouse probably won't have waited for me.
That's true.
So in a weird way, it can feel like you'll be behind. Like maybe they had a troubled past or whatever you say. Like I had a friend, and she, strong Christian, like my only friend from high school who was a Christian, and she and I, we got together about within the past 5 years, and she was dating this guy she hadn't dated, and she just said, like, you know, we both decided about 6 months in, like, we don't want to have this weird pressure of like not having sex. So we just decided to have sex. And I just sat there dumbfounded. Like, what? And heartbroken, truly, because this idea that it's just this thing, let's get it out of the way, so it's not this crazy burden, this heavy weight. It's just such a misunderstanding of what sex is supposed to be in the context of marriage, and so it cheapens it. And when you cheapen something, you then have to build the value back up, as opposed to just accepting it as the beautiful gift that it is from the start. So I think people are not understanding